I always keep the centerpiece loaves in the fridge until right before I bake it. And whenever I'm making one, it's typically how I start off my day. So I don't have to worry about competing with the attention of the oven timers and all of that. And I can really just put all of my attention here. So as you can tell, these vary quite a bit in size from our standard sourdough loaves. Our standard sourdough loaves are 800 grams and these are 2,000 grams. So this is really where my role as bread artist comes into play. These centerpiece loaves are aptly named because they tend to be sold as, you know, the centerpiece of somebody's dinner table. We make a lot of these especially for holidays, special events. And I always make sure to have a few of these at market every week for people to stop by. They're a nice little attention grabber. At market, we display these kind of front and center as a display piece, and it draws people's attention in. And so I try to come up with really unique patterns for these, since, you know, whereas the standard sourdough loaf is really function before, you know, the primary function of the sourdough loaf, you know, the art scoring on those is secondary, whereas the focus on the decoration is much more prominent as a display piece on these centerpiece loaves. So I keep these sheets of parchment up here. I'll kind of doodle designs. When I make these centerpiece loaves just for market, it's really just based on what I feel like scoring at any particular time. I do a range of things that are just like goofy and funny and whimsical. Like I've got this little cowboy sea otter. And these are all designs I made, I believe, last week. I've got this octopus, a very distinguished gentleman, as you can see by his top hat and monocle and mustache. I've got a little betta fish there. And then I've got this astronaut T-Rex here, which is a design I've also done before. And this is one that I'm working on this weekend. And what I design on the centerpieces is also usually a pretty large reflection on how I'm feeling on any particular week. So when I'm working on these big decorative loaves, I spend a lot more time on them, making sure to focus on detail, making sure that the placement is right, since, you know, the primary function of these is to be something that's pretty and decorative. So I have my base sketch to go off of, and then I just kind of replicate it on the dough. And depending on how confident I feel in my freehanding, I might just do a basic outline, or I might go in depth to make sure I don't lose any vital details. So the flower here kind of works like an etch-a-sketch. If you don't like the way things are looking, you can very easily just brush over the surface of the flower and redistribute it and start over again, which I'm kind of finding I should do. There is a finite amount of tension in the dough available for your scoring, and so you have to keep that in mind, especially if you're planning on doing a lot of decorative scoring. You really want to be careful that you don't prematurely use up all the tension available on the decorative part and then lose what's available by the time that you get to the functional scoring. Although if you do have enough functional scoring or enough decorative scoring, it can act as functional scoring, but in my experience at least, that's a little harder to manage and predict how it'll behave. I'm varying the depths of which I'm scoring. Like these little eyes are not as deep as the outline of the face that I want to be more prominent. And there's also another reason why I'm doing this. There's another scoring technique that I'm experimenting with there, which I will come back to in a bit. So when it's a holiday, like for Mother's Day, I had a pretty wide range of different patterns I did for that. For Christmas, Hanukkah, things like that. But otherwise, if it's not a holiday, I'm just kind of left up to my own devices, which is kind of part of the fun. You just show up to the market, and I don't know how many people are expecting to see a dinosaur astronaut. It's just something that's, you know, cute and goofy. I hope it gives passersby and, you know, whoever ends up with the loaf a little bit of joy to see, especially, you know, under current circumstances where we can all take a little joy wherever we can get it. Now that I have the primary outline done, I'm just going to work on some little detailing, really bring the illustration to life. Kind of overviewing how things look. The way that the scoring opens up before you bake it is a really good indicator of how it'll look afterwards. And so as I'm examining my scoring here, I'm looking for places that aren't connected that should be connected. Or maybe I want this aspect, you know, the seal on the dinosaur astronaut's helmet to be a little more prominent. So I'm just going to go over it a little bit to make sure that's standing out. Curves and little right angles, these points where lines touch and intersect, are really tricky to get the hang of. Another trick for that, it doesn't look like I have it here. More people are using this baking station. I don't mean to throw anybody under the bus. It's just as likely that I lost it on my own. But another thing you do that's especially helpful if you do lettering is you can take a skewer or a toothpick and you can just kind of put the tip of the toothpick into your scoring pattern to kind of wiggle it and force it open. All right, I think I've got a good amount of detailing. So where my non-traditional kind of functional scoring comes into play largely is in these big loaves. I like to do these big circular frames. So this is to ensure that all the work that I put into this decorative scoring, it'll give it the most chance for it to stay intact and to not expand and kind of explode, because I'm giving the bread enough space here to expand where I want it to. So now I'm going to add some little final touches. Maybe I want to sketch this out. A little planet over here. Maybe a little rocket ship. So when people are showing up at the market and they want a centerpiece, they're really just having to pick from what I've chosen to make myself. But recently we have had the option for people to commission their own centerpieces, which has been a lot of fun. I've been expanding the type of scoring I've been doing. One of my commissions was a really nice birthday gift for a friend that was a portrait of the gift recipient and her dog. That was a lot of fun. I did one recently of a company logo. It's just a nice way to kind of break out of what I might think to do on my own and really be forced to kind of work on what I'm comfortable with. Got my little rocket ship there, and I'm just gonna finish it off by adding some stars. And for these, I'm just scratching very lightly. I don't want these to take away from the more prominent features of my design here. Just to be a little background detail. All right, now I'm just gonna assess here, kind of go over and make sure I'm not missing any fine details. I definitely feel a lot more pressure for these scoring designs to come out, since really the primary appeal to them is that, you know, they're supposed to be pretty. And so once you put it in the oven, there's nothing else you can do. So I try to just take a moment, especially since I've spent, probably 8 minutes on it so far. It doesn't hurt to just take a second and kind of evaluate to make sure there's nothing that I'm missing. There's no corners that are detached. So one of the techniques that I've been doing recently is trying to find ways to add more negative space into my designs. And so I've scored these little eyes here, and I really want them to stick out and be dark compared to the rest of the T-Rex's face. So I'm kind of peeling up the edge here, and then I use the loam to cut off the top section of the skin. And you want to be careful when you're doing this. One, because razors are sharp, and two, because in the process of doing that, if you're to accidentally get any flour onto the exposed dough, then you totally negate the purpose of doing it. So these loaves are essentially the ideal in color for me, not necessarily in how the functional scoring came out, but the decorative scoring is pretty good. So really tight, round circles and shapes, like if you want to do little dots for eyes. It's really difficult to cut that tightly with a loam, and so one thing you can do is just press down and make little eyes yourself. There's a bunch of different techniques that I'm experimenting with week to week to find out what all is possible with the bread. And you know, someone who takes the approach of bread as an art medium, I'm always just trying to push myself creatively. The dino knot is ready to go. Good luck, buddy. I believe in you. And now the agony of waiting 20 minutes to see if it was successful starts. So the timer just went off. It's not ready yet, but it still has another round to go without steam, but I'm very eager to see the initial results of my scoring. So I'm pretty pleased with this. After it's done, I can flip it upside down and tap the back side of it to get any of the loose flour that's sitting on top off of it. But all in all, that was really successful. I'm pleased with it. And so now is the second round with just releasing the steam, hardening the crust, getting really nice color, which is another aspect to consider when you're doing decorative scoring is, how dark you want to bake the loaf, how much you want there to be a contrast. Some people generally like just having a really light blonde loaf, which is really pretty in its own way. But especially for these bigger loaves, I really want that visual contrast and the design to really pop. So that's part of why it's really important to me to have that really clean, white, opaque surface, and then the scoring can really pop out and stand out. So now that the first round is over and my anxiety has left, now that I can see that it's been successful, then now I can relax. You hear that? The timer went off. All right, the big reveal. Here he is. Already I can tell the color is like exactly where I want it to be. There he is. Dino knot in orbit. Exploring a brave new world. Ready for your dinner table. So I'm really pleased with how this one turned out. To kind of critique my own work here, I probably could have made the decorative scoring a little smaller and put the circular frame, have that also be smaller, because what I ideally would like this to look like is for the circular framing to kind of lift up evenly and rise and be kind of wholly separate, and have where you notice here in the loaf where it the way that it's shaped and the way that the ear sticks up prominently, that's what I'm usually going for here, and I have that a little bit on this side, but not as prominently as I'd like. That's just me being nitpicky though. Overall, I'm pretty pleased with this guy. He's fun, he makes me smile. I hope he makes other people smile too.